No music.
I know, thank goodness. All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6:30 on Tuesday, December 13th. I almost said January, not quite. Welcome. So we'll officially call this meeting to order again at 6:30. We'll do a quick roll call. Could we start maybe at this end of the table?
Sure. Jan Fuller-Jack, District 2.
Dennis Wings, representative.
Carly Hoover, Leyden, District 1.
Flip Vernon, superintendent.
Edna Morris, District 4.
Dave Larson, District 5.
Well, it's all inclusive roll call. And then welcome to our guests, both in person and online. As always, I'm really grateful that you're willing to invest and spend time with district business this evening. So I'll pass it to Director Fuller-Jack for our welcome message.
All right. Well, we agree when we gather together to stay engaged, to experience discomfort, be vulnerable, to speak our truth, and to expect and accept non-closure. Get those from courageous conversation. What is that last word anyway? Courageous conversation what?
Compass.
Compass, thank you. I should have been able to figure that out. And our land acknowledgement. We in the Tukwila School District acknowledge that the land where we teach, collaborate, learn, and play is the traditional land of the First People of Seattle, the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Muckleshoot tribes. As a public school district, we have, I should stand closer when I try to do this. We have a responsibility for the stewardship of this land. And we recognize the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people who have been living and working here since time immemorial. And I apologize for not reading that very smoothly.
Thank you. And all right, so now we will, I invite folks to stand if you're comfortable doing so. Pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for its one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty for all. So we will move to approve tonight's agenda. So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So that brings us to our first opportunity for public comment this evening. As a reminder, there are a variety of different ways that you can engage in public comment if you're interested in doing so. If you are joining us virtually, you can raise your hand using that function in Zoom. You can also add your name in the chat to let us know that you are interested in speaking. If you are here in person and would like to offer public comment, there is a sign-up sheet at the front, and I do not think we have any at this moment. Okay. So I'll give folks online just a second in case they're searching for that raise hand button. Okay, we will have another opportunity at the end of the meeting, and I really encourage one of the hopes around having that public comment at the end is as we're engaging in business, engaging in discussion, if there are things that are coming up for you as you're listening at home or listening here, that there's that opportunity that's provided at the end for you to share those thoughts or questions or feedbacks as it relates to the discussion that we've had. All right, so with that, we'll move to our reports. We've got both a race and equity update and a COVID-19 update.
Right. For this evening, I'm going to do the race and equity update again. I know we're trying to get this down more into some of those, but we've been a little bit in staff. So we had a recent race and equity meeting last week. And each of the buildings were talking about how they're seeing the implementation of their race and equity teams for this year and things that they're working on. It was really great to have each of the teams share some of they each recap what they were doing since the last race and equity meeting. And then they spent time in breakout rooms by each particular building talking about delving in a little bit more deeply I think part of the challenge that they've seen is just finding that common time, even within the buildings. So having that district race and equity meeting, that gives them some kind of built-in time. So because it's 90 minutes, it allows some good time for them to at least connect. We also talked during that time about the availability of some of the core books. You heard earlier in the work session, some of the books that Cascade U and Dr. Frenstad and their team have been working on. But we have 4 books here also that we've been looking at. The race and equity teams know about that as well. They're the street data that we have, the 4 pivots. That's right, like educational leadership and culturally responsive school leadership. So we have many copies of each one of those. So during the last meeting, I asked which team or buildings needed additional copies of the book. So this week I've been distributing those. And it stands. Anybody can email in. We probably have maybe 30 copies of each one of those books still here, which we'll probably continue to distribute. But if we need more, we can move them. So those are ones that we're working on. The first 3 were ones that we're working on with our trainers, Dr. Rogers Ard and Dr. Canals. So those are the 3 books that we've been looking at. The last time we met with them, we went over a couple of chapters in street data. So I think when they come back and work with the board again, I'm going to make sure that we're kind of connecting with the same training, information, reflections in the books that we've been having before. So in the last session we had with those, with district leads was really pretty good. I mean, the conversations, as the board may remember from the first ones, they really do challenge some of the thinking and try and really get the most out of the time that they have with us with race and equity. So I appreciate the work that they're doing. We also got a little bit more information about the culturally responsive school leadership training opportunity. It corresponds with that last book that we have there. Dr. Mohammed Khalifa has an institute that also goes around the culturally responsive school leadership. That isn't based on just the principal. It's really talking about within the building kind of the lead. So the idea behind that was to have basically the principal and the race and equity leads as a team go to some of this training. Dr. Khalifa was making that opportunity available to some of the kind of roadmap improvement collaborative districts as waiving the tuition for that particular lead. There's both an in-person and a virtual option. And the Puget Sound ESD also was going to put up some money to assist with travel for the in-person one. So right now, there's basically the person coordinating that, Mr. Adam Kay at the Puget Sound ESD, was finding out from each of the school districts how many people would be interested in going to that and put a timeline on it. I think it's by the end of this week. But he has said that Tukwila could have at least 4 of those slots, and if other schools don't take them, then we can increase the number. So basically 4 would allow us to have 2 school teams go, at least to an in-person. If it was virtual, then we could probably do more people than that. So hopefully I'll have an update for the next time and we can talk about what that might look like. Hopefully we can take advantage of the opportunity. And then we did attempt to have an interview for one of the race and equity positions, the anti-racist coach position, I believe. We had 3 people apply for the position, but none of them actually decided to take us on the interview. So we're going through assessing what that kind of looks like, getting some feedback from that we had from the people who are interested in the application, figure out what our next steps are going to be. So that's what I have for this week on race and equity updates.
Any questions? COVID.
I don't know if we have Ms. Maestro online or not? You're there. Ms. Jones, I don't know if you can share what for the COVID update that we had.
Sure. We have combo test. Very exciting. I wish I had this for my daughter because the fact that it's a combo influenza A and B and COVID test all in one. That those are being distributed to our schools. Keep in. Very excited about that so that we can do spot differential diagnosis.
So currently we're on top of that, we're just trying to track any other positives for other tests that may be happening, or any other health issues that may be happening. I know we've talked a little bit about RSV. There was a recent issue in the surrounding districts around a different health concern. So we're just wanting to make sure that kind of we're on top of that for us as well. So right now, I'm not hearing any of those additional concerns, but we're going to keep a shut eye out to just see if we're hearing anything more, or we're hearing from families about getting those kind of diagnoses for absences.
I was at Showalter today, and they were saying that they thought there was about 20% out. So,
I don't know about that. I can follow up on that, but I'm not sure about that.
yeah, I don't know if that's district wide or what. I know it's been sweeping through here.
Is the COVID dashboard, and I noticed I'm just looking at it now, it looks like it hasn't been updated since November. That
It should continue to be updated, so I'll find out why that hasn't been updated for a while.
I was looking at it was about this time last year, almost exactly this time last year when COVID took off.
Yeah,
I don't know that there's evidence yet of doing that this year, but keep an eye on it.
yeah.
Is there, I'm curious around like the testing component and wondering if, as we're preparing to get to come back to school in January, if there's a way to kind of do like a mass distribution of some of our tests. And maybe those combo tests would be great. That way folks know before they're coming back to school if they're, carrying influenza or COVID.
Yeah, I think we can have them available for sure for people, but I don't think we can like mandatory test folks.
No, I know we can't mandatory test folks. But I think we can, yeah, so
Yeah, suggested.
yeah. One, we could encourage it, strongly, perhaps. Right? I mean, I think so, because where we're still at, we still have the ability to do that, because that's going to keep our kids and our staff safe. So maybe, I guess I would like to ask that we do a big push ahead of us coming back to the building in January, to distribute tests out, have them available. That of course will mean really intentional communication around that, since we'll likely be out of school.
Their vaccine clinics include flu vaccine.
Yes,
Okay.
pretty much all the vaccines available for
Okay.
folks, we have them available at the time.
Because I can personally test the effectiveness of this year's flu vaccine. I had it, but it was a little, not much at all. But I had the flu shot, so it was 3 or 4 days of really mild thing, which
I had a flu shot and I was sicker than a dog.
yeah. So
So,
the things don't always work, but
yeah.
good for me.
I also, I'm thinking a little bit about, I know the district that you were talking about, that there's kind of another health thing that's come up. I wonder if it would be valuable to even just kind of do these are some things that we're seeing in our region, some things to be aware for, some common signs and symptoms of these things. I mean, just name it was TB, right? Tuberculosis. And so like, I mean, that's one that's so uncommon I wouldn't even necessarily know what the symptoms of that are. And so even just getting some information out there, I think could be really useful. And my guess is there's stuff already on public, Licking County Public Health that we can utilize or in some of their things.
I know last night with the city council, they made a statement about the water supply in Tukwila because the Highline water supply has been challenged. I don't know if you would want to, the fire department spoke about it last night. I think it was the fire department. Anyway, I don't know if you would want to put that kind of information up. If anyone's asking any questions about, are we on that same water system with Highline, which we are not, but it's a good question.
Any other questions, thoughts around COVID? It's almost as if this should change to like, just colorful, but like, yeah, health update. Almost at this
Wellness update.
Yeah. Okay, great. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and move to approving our consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so then we'll move to board discussion. Legislative priorities. Dr. Larson.
So, I just took basically took last year's, start with the okay. And I didn't really make a whole lot of changes to it. I changed around a little bit the priority list of them, and I'll talk a little bit why I did that. Which the one at the top is the equity funding thing, and I put the LAP funding one at the top, and the reason I did that is a couple of things. You go to the other sheet, start talking about why. So this is an interesting graph that I got from the Education Trust, which is a national organization that works on equity and education system. And what this kind of shows, is the way that the different states fund education, and the colors kind of get lost on the screen here. Yeah, it's on the screen, it looks like gray is student-based funding. So those are all, the majority of the states fund their education system based on student need. And so, more for special ed, more for students in poverty and so forth. You notice that Washington State is not one of those. It's a resource based, so basically it funds based on the number of staff that you need for some number of students, regardless of what the student is. And so this is it basically says we're kind of an outlier in that sense. And so what is that resulted in? So if we go to the next slide. So I took a look at, that one. So the federal government every couple of years runs the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and it does this for 8th grade and 4th grade, and does it every 2 years. They skipped 21 because of COVID and did it in 22. And so what this shows is the gaps, so the income-based achievement gaps relative to other states, for Washington State. So, 1 is the lowest gap and 50 would be the highest gap. And so you can see here for 8th grade reading and math for the last couple of tests, Washington State has some of the worst income gaps in the entire country. I think you can trace it kind of back to the way the system is funded, produces these kind of results kind of year after year. And the other thing that I found is, we go to the next slide, interesting little tidbit. So this is all the King County districts, and I was looking at 6th grade reading test for 21-22. And it's, you know, the income levels along the x-axis, and then the y-axis is the percent passed. And what's interesting is that little dot over there on the right called Rainier Prep, which is a charter school up in White Center, and they're grades 5, 6, 7, and 8, so they're middle school. And you see that they're way, way above the line of where they would be expected to be given their income level, which is very similar to ours. And as I mentioned before, I went up there to see, okay, so what are they doing? How are they doing? And this is not, you know, this is a result that they've achieved for several years now. So it's not kind of a fluke. And one of the big things that they're doing is what's called co-teaching. So in every class, they have 2 certificated teachers in each classroom. So their effective class size is about 14 compared to ours. It's about, in 6th grade, it's about twice that or so. And, you know, so the question then becomes, so how do they do that? how do they, you know, where do they get money to provide 2 teachers in each classroom? And the answer is they pay, their average pay is about half of what we pay. And so, you know, they have a very junior staff, about 3 or 4 years experience, ours is about 10. And so, you know, that's not a model that's, you know, workable for us, of course. I mean, you know, pay teachers half. But the question then comes up, okay, suppose that, you know, the LAP funding in this state were to increase by a factor of 10 or something, then, you know, we could possibly do something like that. And the results, if we did it well, we would be, you know, our results would be up there, you know, with the much wealthier district. So anyway, I found this a really interesting. So this is one of the things I'm going to start using to kind of make the case for why LAP. You know, LAP funding is one of those things that's it's not on most people's radar for this legislative session and hasn't been for a while. Although I'm starting to working with our WASDA legislative folks and Professor from the University of Washington and some folks from the Equity and Education Coalition and some other folks to try and see if we can start to put together an alliance to start advocating the legislature for this issue. So we go back to the legislative authorities one. So anyway, that's kind of why I have that one kind of up at the top. I'm going to really start trying to push that one. It's going to, obviously this is a multi-year effort, but I think, you know, it actually could produce the kind of results that we need in terms of closing achievement gaps. I want to talk about all these others other than number 3 down there is special education. So that's one there's a lot of people, a lot of districts that are talking about that one. And in fact, I heard today that Senator Paulette from Seattle is going to be introducing a bill to, among other things, increase. So the way federal education funds is it's limited to 13.5% of your students. Well, I think this year for the first time we passed that 13.5 limit. So he's going to put in a bill to increase the limit and also potentially to increase what's called the multiplier. So basically every special education student, they're a basic education student, so they get that allocation and then they get basically double until another set. But every district knows that's not enough. You know, typically all the districts in King County have been involved in some of those discussions, and we've collected a lot of data, and typically districts are at least 25% underfunded or something in that range, some are more, some are less. But anyway, that's going to be, that will definitely be on the agenda for the legislature this time. The other one that's interesting is number 4, which is a little bit tricky because a number of years ago, the legislature decided to pay for a teacher's salary based on what's called regionalization. I mean, this is a cost of living adjustment. So districts that are in high cost of living areas, i.e. King County, and some others will get this 18% bump up on top of the base salary, and the ones in the lower district may get 12, or depends on what the regionalization factor is. So this year, Chris Reichel, the superintendent of public instruction, has a proposal, which I have here, which is kind of complicated. It's based on the compensation advisory committee, and what he wants to do is cap the regionalization factor at 12%. And I can tell you right now that every district in King County is going to be all over that one, which is why I think it's probably not going to go anywhere, but nonetheless, we got to keep an eye on it. It's one of the recommendations that he has, a number of recommendations in this thing, some of which I think are interesting. Talks about bonuses for staff at high poverty schools, and you know, there's bonuses for teachers in special education programs. So it's a whole list of things, which somebody in the legislature will have to pick it up and propose it as a bill. So it'll be interesting to see which one of those comes along and which one doesn't.
Sorry, can I just add to that?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm part of that, those talks. And so with the 12%, they want to cap it, but what they also want to do is give 6% on top of the regular rate, so that districts that have the 18% regionalization, they just break even, while other districts capitalize.
Right, right, that's correct. And that's part of his recommendation. So, however, then the interesting thing to me is that the question is, what's the justification for lowering the 18 to 12? Is it that, I mean, those are in there because they supposedly reflect the cost of living in the area, and there's no data that he's presented. I asked him that, and he hasn't responded yet. What's your data that says that King County is now, you know, 6% less expensive? And you know, so I don't. But you're right. It's if they did both sides of, that's one of the recommendations, is to get to bump up everybody 6%. And then, so for us, in theory, it would be revenue neutral. But going forward, we wouldn't get that 18%. And so, and yeah, I haven't heard back from them about why, because that wasn't a recommendation that the compensation work group made. It's one that he made, and without any data that I can find. So anyway, I guess at this point, if there's any suggestions or questions or comments for the thing, I got a request from the Highline School District Board. They wanted to see our list, which I said I'd send them when we put it together. But the other thing I will, if we go down to the bottom of the second page, one of the thing I'll say is, so what we're working on in terms of the capital budget is Dr. Herndon and William, I guess, are working on an application to get capital money to cover some of the upgrades to the PAC. We're going to use some of the bond money, and then hopefully we'll get some money from the capital budget. So, and I think we're probably going to just focus on that one, the safety upgrades for the South 144th Street Bridge. That's one that the city is working on. And there may be other sources for that. I don't know. But anyway, we're going to work with Representative Hackney on the PAC one. Definitely the application, they finally came out with it. And so we're going to work on getting that one. Somewhere down the line in future, I mean, we can always use more early learning spaces, but we'll probably focus on the PAC issue. So anyway, if there's any questions or ideas for including other things, or
I just have a question about like what's the next step? for these priorities?
So I use these when I'm talking to legislators. That's basically how I use this. Like I said, Highline requested to see it. They probably incorporated in some of their stuff, but that's the next step.
My one question is less about the priorities specifically and kind of about the funding model as it compares to other states. Is there, so the equitable funding model that you're kind of advocating for, would that be a switch in our state? So it would be more reflective of what other states are doing,
right.
Actually are.
Right. Yeah.
Which is just interesting if we think about Washington State as an entity that wants to be equitable.
Right.
And maybe even says we're more equitable than we are, and in comparison to other states. Right. It's just interesting. The kind of disillusionment that is happening there.
So the two big blocks to this equity that this been working on for years is obviously the district serving wealthy students. They don't want this. The current system works really well for them. And then the other one, which is the WA, they have not. And I've talked to somebody who's been working with them for a while, and there's some elements in there that are interested in this kind of a funding system, but as yet they don't want to go here. I mean, they've been heavily involved in developing the prototypical school model, which is their current funding model, and so they're going to take some work to get on board, I think, with it. So, but a lot of it, like I say, it's kind of building up a coalition of people that can push forward, and so it's definitely a multi-year project. But yeah. Okay. If there's nothing else, I'll go with this for this year, and then do that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, so that brings us now to our questions only presentations. So we just kind of go down the line. Any additional questions that may have come up for folks? I'll start with the special education.
Yeah. So, I was interested. First of all, I appreciate this presentation in the 15 years that I've been here. This is probably the best special education presentation, and the reason is because you're highlighting a lot of the data that and areas that we need to work on. It's typically the presentations have just been kind of like, here's what the education department does, or the special education does,
Right.
But you've actually pulled the state performance data that we actually, that's the first time I need to done that. So anyway, I appreciate, because that allows us to kind of understand where we need to work and maybe put some more dollars or do different things. So that's great. And one of the areas that was interesting to me was the graduation rates, which is one of the areas that we get measured on, and particularly the dropout rate. So for years, I think we had, when I'm remembering the data, we had a lot of special education students that continued, they may take more than 4 years, which is fine, and they continued, but starting I'm looking on page 17, starting, 4 years ago, all of a sudden, our dropout rate for the special education graduation kind of went up significantly. And I'm trying to, figure out why that is. I know one thing that happened, I first started at the board, we had special education rates of overall 8%, 9%, really low numbers, which never made any sense to me. And then I guess 3 or 4 years ago, I think you know, all of a sudden our special numbers, and now we're up at 14%. So, which makes more sense to me, given our demographics. So I don't know if some of that is related to that. I'm just curious, you listed in the answer here that, you know, you've got the state school coordinator and, you know, we're looking at different things. Do you have any clue at all as to why that particular thing went up so much? I know it probably predated you by about a year, maybe.
Yeah, again, I think we have that. I love the fact that we have such a outline strategic plan for it to look at attendance. And so knowing that, just looking at research, we know ninth graders are really most important here.
Right.
We've been talking to our case managers, and since they have that unique experience of having that one somewhat mentor of a case manager that they can turn to, that's helpful. But I think also making sure that we can really work with our case managers, that we don't forget that we're all working in silos, that we have the same school coordinator, we do have our counselors, and so making those phone calls earlier than later. We do, you know, by the state definition of post-secondary outcomes, we have a window of time, which is about a year lagging, where we make the phone calls for the in-state indicator, where we call and say, okay, once they do leave, where are they now?
Right.
Essentially,
Right.
Are they in a job?
Right.
Are they volunteering anywhere? And are they in some type of school? I think one of the things that's going to be really strategic moving forward to ensure that we aren't seeing students drop out is really looking at our options for community outings and community-based instruction, which we started to see this summer. I think once we start to in-house look and build a transition program, I think our students are going to be more excited and engaged about what's next in the world. I know that when we had our conversation about the student handbook that evening, I was in the room and we were talking about goals, and I think that we just once we continue to write student goals, and the students are going to be more a part of their IEP meetings, and the students can then talk about what they want to do. And so that the transition plan isn't just something we fill out, like school beyond plan, it goes even beyond that. So that transition plan really targets goals that we write into the IEP that are part of their transition plan. And so I think as we start to have more student centered IEP meetings, where they are presenting their work and presenting their goals and talking about what it is they would like to do, those are going to be some really intentional things we can do to ensure they stay in school. Also, when they see partnering with folks in the community, whether it's working on some of those general the skills that they're working on, especially in our LRC2, our students that are working more on daily living skills, having that opportunity to practice that out in the community, going and making lists of ordering food and going to the grocery store and going to the library and working on transportation and having some jobs that we even have where they have support, that we ensure they have jobs while they're with us, so that when we leave, they'll have those. I think just revisiting that, and our population is growing so much, especially our high school numbers are really growing. But enrollment for special education is not going down, it is going up, and I think it's at 386 students. And so as we see more and more students in LRC1 and LRC2 in high school, being really strategic about mentoring, making sure they have a safe person in the building to go to, especially starting in ninth grade, and then really being those mission partnerships out in the community, and working on those community-based instructional opportunities and job opportunities and how we can support them in that.
I'm hopeful that those pieces will help us, really hook our kids so that they might help out. So those are some of the future plans. But that doesn't answer your question. So I talked around some ideas of how we keep them in, but I guess we didn't really go.
So it sounds like we somehow, yeah, maybe had more of them identified in high school, which, yeah, and if we didn't have those things in places, then those kind of students could just drop out, you know, whereas maybe before we didn't have so many. So, yeah, it sounds like, so of all the measures, I was looking at all these measures that the state uses, the one that, you know, were the most, well, we met requirements of virtually everything except for this one area, which is, you know, what do students do after they leave us?
Right.
And, you know, we got like a 30%, you know, mark, and it should be about twice that or something like that to get us out of this. I mean, this look like it's the only category that's a problem area. So,
so that will be one we will be looking at this whole school year. I did look and talk to surrounding districts, and the numbers are about the same, just because of COVID, a lot of students did not go out in the community or try to get a job or try to go to school, and so they stay home. And so when we make the phone call and say, hey, what's going on? It's been a year since you graduated. Where are you now? Where are you now? And say, well, let's go to home. So I think that's really making the data not as accurate as if we weren't in a pandemic, you know, it's accurate if they're home. But
yeah, okay.
I think that's the impact, to be quite honest. And I've talked to the NDP about that and our surrounding district directors as well. So, but it's
I guess this, as you say, this data that we're looking at is, so, well, 21, 22, but it's backward looking, right? So when you're back, which, yeah, so many other districts.
Are you in contact with any of the students graduated last year to find out what they're doing now? Is there an improvement in that?
Well, the phone calls that we make, they're lagging. So we certainly can start the phone calls now. The data window for when we call is so far out. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense that we do it that way, but we certainly can start earlier and see where it's going.
Just wondering if it's different this year.
Okay, that's yeah, sounds like we're got a number of different ideas for how to get on that one. But that's, other than that, all the other measures seem to be in good shape. So thanks.
I have one question about, I know in the past we've had a backlog of kids who may qualify, especially in elementary. And I know that the process to get qualified is complex. And I know that we're short-staffed. So where are we? Are you feeling comfortable getting kids through the process into the IEPs and 540s?
Yes, since by law we have a very strict timeline, I feel very confident, especially when we look at our timeline data for initial or evaluation, and then from evaluation we have the data. So if you feel that really good and we'll do it we have to be. So if you go on top of that, and all of our school psychologists, we're not just for staff and school psychologists. We have all the allotment and all of our speech ones here. So all of our evaluations are on time.
Cool. Thank you.
I guess the one, yeah, so I guess, so you're working on this issue of getting Medicaid funding for potentially seeing if we can get some of that. So
absolutely,
as I said, I'm happy to share I had a call with the healthcare authority person oversees this and had some ideas about, I think you mentioned one of the ideas, yeah, which was to, the IEP software that we use has a connection to a reimbursement component.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so we're looking at that to see if that would be cost effective.
the piece of our already existing vendor platform.
Yeah, right. That was one of the suggestions that came from, so, yeah, okay.
I have a question that might be totally off the wall and I have no idea, so I'm sorry about that. But like hearing some of the things, like the really wanting to get like a transition program, and when you say transition program, that's out of school into whatever the next phase is, right? Knowing that like special education is not fully funded, not even close, and there's always a big gap there. I'm wondering, thinking about, is there any opportunity to partner with like CTE, for instance, and potentially even use some of those funds as a way to create a more comprehensive, I don't know, CTE program that also includes special education students.
And yes, it should definitely include our students. And so that is a partnership that it's well worth investigating and looking at what the desires are of the students and how we can support them in that work. And we do have Puget Sound Skills Center, and we also have Achieve at Highline College program, and there is a transition program at Highline School District, as well as just other opportunities that we would love to be able to have our own transition program.
So it's like maybe it's, you know, how we can get perhaps creative a little bit with the fundings that we do have. Yeah, great idea. Any other questions on this? Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you all.
Okay. Grants updates.
I'm curious about the last update on, or the last grant that's listed, digital equity. I see that there's nothing. Not really. I'm just curious as to what do we have anything in mind for that? Anything particular in mind? I don't see anything's been used or.
I don't believe anything has been used yet. We were just awarded the grant.
Oh, okay. This came in the door.
So,
okay.
yes, but Jeff, Mr. Baker may have more context on how he wants to do the grant. I know him and his team worked really hard on getting that grant.
And the thing here talks about provide adaptive technology such as equipment or technology services for students with special needs, or translation service for ELL students. So can you unmute yourself, Jeff? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Excuse me, I couldn't quite hear what grant was mentioned.
Oh, the digital equity grant?
Oh, yes, the digital equity grant. Though that grant's going to be used to fund new interactive panels for our classrooms whose smart projectors are actually end of life at this point in terms of the interactivity. And so we received about half the amount we need from this grant to put interactive panels in the entire district.
So that's the entire use of it, or are there other purposes?
Are there other what?
Are there anything else you have in mind, or it's all going to go to that one purpose, or?
Yeah, that was a specific grant from OSPI for that. It's a significant investment in this form of technology, and we are going to have to use some of our tech levy funding to complete the entire deployment in the school district.
Okay.
Ms. Burton, thank you for adding the so a little bit more context around the measures. We'll work on something. Thank you for adding that column in there. That's really helpful for me. I think my one curiosity, and this was something I think I'd asked you for a while ago, to be kind of included in these quarterly grant reports is, my understanding is that these are mostly at the district level and that there are some grants at the building level. And so I think I'd love either to be added in or maybe even a separate report somewhere, but I'd love some information about what those other individual school grants are. Which ones?
FHS, Showalter, CB. They're like the Carl Perkins is FHS, that's number 4 then.
So I guess what determines, yeah, I guess those are like what, how does a grant end up on this sheet versus not? Kind of.
So some of them are annual grants, and then some of them, so we get like emails that says, hey, you know, here's this new grant that comes out. And usually, you know, I get a lot of those emails and I disperse them. I kind of look through them and disperse according, like, hey, I know we were talking about this initiative or we were talking about that. And so they are dispersed that way. Or they are just a continuum, just like how Dr. Primstad had talked about her OSSI that's specific to Cascade View. And that's year 5. So every year she kind of knows to keep a lookout for that one. And
but so like the Foster High School one that's on here, for instance, that might have been one that was kind of initiated by you that you kind of sent to them and that you've been tracking them since.
So the Carl Perkins is a very old, well, it's an older grant. So it's probably a continuum way before I got here. My previous school district I used it as well. So it just depends on what is new and what's out there. So the only one that I can think of that's really new would be our heritage, dual language, those types of grants, because we knew that that's what we wanted to implement in the school district. And so we were looking, you know, as Ms. Chan and her department were looking to see what was out there. Same thing with the digital equity. So, and same thing with, which will be on the next report, is the outdoor learning grant that we're just awarded. Yay, just 17. And so that's kind of how a lot of those come to fruition.
Okay, yeah, so sorry, to clarify, I guess like, how do you decide which individual school grants end up on this grant report? Because there are some, again, Carl Perkins, that's specific to Foster High School, but then for instance, why is like the OSSI grant for Cascade View not on this particular report?
It should be.
Is that the Target 3?
Yes, Target 3 OSSI. It might have a different naming convention, but it's on there. All the grants that funnel through, whether it's state, federal, local, end up on that report. And if they have been fully expended, they're no longer on the report.
Okay, so this is reflective of all of the active grants in the district, either in for the individual school or district wide.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Maybe we can what is the order, the sequence of the presentation? Because it doesn't look alphabetical. I'm thinking maybe if the school ones are first, or they're kind of grouped together because they're kind of in the middle, sandwiched in.
I'm not. It might be program wise, numeric order. It's a feeder. It feeds in from a whole nother grant document.
Maybe we can highlight the school ones.
Okay, I mean, that's not necessary specifically. I think I just more wanted to know that all of the grants were reflected here and that there weren't individual grants happening at the schools that were not here.
So is the Disney program a grant?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't recall receiving any grant money. But I will look into that. I want to say that based on our free and reduced rate, we were able to get a waiver to continue the program, but I don't think it was necessarily a grant, but I will look into it. But I believe that.
Which program is that?
The Disney.
Disney.
Oh, the Disney.
That's you.
And
Okay.
this 1 year heritage, tribal heritage. What are the elementaries planning on doing with that? Do you know? Since it's a 1 year grant.
myself and Dr. Dino are working on that. We'll listen to that, but we're working.
So, we're working to review what was completed with last year's grant to determine, excuse me, moving forward. And for at elementary specifically, there was a summer program at SBE last summer, and likely that there will be programming for kids in the summer. Other programming already pretty well established by this time of the year, so it's hard to add more before school.
So I guess the communities and schools, now that's one where, you know, the district puts in some money and they, I don't know, is it called in kind? I mean, they don't give us any money, they give us people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some portion of that the other person. So I guess that wouldn't, yeah, that wouldn't technically be a grant.
No, but that's paid for through LAPI poverty from each a portion of each of the schools, and I believe that.
Yeah, the district side of it comes from there, but using schools, they put in some.
Yes, but it's not, we don't get the tangible dollars.
Right.
They just give us
Right.
our portion of it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So the deep dive into the grant, the LAPI poverty that we did on Saturday was really, really informative for me. So I'm curious, like from a board perspective, which one, like, is there another grant that we'd like to kind of do a little bit of deep dive to understand more of next?
Well, for me, I'm really curious about what is being done with the tribal heritage one. Because I don't.
Yeah, I think that's one that you specifically, and I know I think we've all been asking about for at least the last 6 or 7 months.
Yes.
So I think that would be definitely an interesting one.
I kind of tend to look at the big dollar ones. So yeah, so the LAP and LAP and LAPI poverty, we looked at those, that's probably the single biggest dollar amount. The next one is the GBIP state ELL and LL grant, the type of one grants. Those are always interesting ones. I mean, I think most of that is used to fund people. So, but
what was the first one that you said?
GBIP, which is transitional bilingual, otherwise ELL.
Okay. Okay.
You have 15 different ways to say that.
Okay, so maybe if, and we can kind of plan these out based on what would make the most sense, particularly if kind of like the work around the tribal heritage grant is kind of in process. But I think, yeah, maybe in the next little bit, getting some info on the TVS one, and then that's not the right thing. That's not what you said, but you wrote it down. You know what I mean? And then the tribal heritage grants as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And would it be reasonable to lump those three together, the tribal heritage ones, or keep them separate?
We don't have a tribal. There's 3 grants within that category. We have year grants for heritage English support specifically.
So we have 1 year tribal heritage, and then 2 year tribal heritage, and then 2 year heritage dual language. So
they're specific to heritage or heritage and like you don't have the funds for any tribal.
I will take the naming convention off because the way that the grant's written is they have like tribal, heritage, and dual. So I will take off the tribal.
Got it.
Okay. Heritage, and dual. Heritage, dual.
Okay.
And can you tell me on the refugee grant, it's like 5 from the bottom there. Is that just basically a pass through to the IRC?
Yes, we work in direct partnership with them, and they do a lot of the work. And I am very happy because we originally had somewhere around like $90,000, and it went down, and then now it's up to 120,000. So that's great, which means they can serve more families and do more work.
Great.
And probably our refugee numbers are going to start going up. I mean, probably already, I would imagine.
I would have to look at the latest report.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I'm
since
sure.
immigration is
I brought in 3 more today.
opened up. And people are flooding in the southern border, so.
Great, any other questions? Thank you. Okay, so 2022 summer school data. I'll be really super honest, I had a little bit of difficulty understanding this particular report and where it tied into anything. Because to me, it was just a bunch of numbers with no real connection to something.
This is probably, this is in reaction to some requests that I made, because we got in a summer school report, a while ago, and it was kind of like, well, from an academic perspective, it didn't really make any substantial gain. So what I was asking was, we need to disaggregate down to, and this was kind of the extreme on it. But when you look through here, you can see that some students made some substantial gains. A lot of students seem to go backwards, and which would be, you could translate into summer learning loss, basically. And so what I was trying to get at was, okay, what worked well in summer school? What didn't work well in summer school? And so then as we move forward, how can we change it? And because it was just originally presented at kind of the high level, without disaggregating. And so my point was, we need to disaggregate. And when I look at this, one of the disaggregations is at the class level or grade level. And I guess, I don't know if anybody knows, in this summer school, were there more than one first grades, more than one second grade, or was there just one first grade, one second grade, one third grade, one fourth grade? We need Michael here.
Yeah, I think if you look at the numbers, there were too many 2s here to have that be one grade.
Yeah, that's what I was curious. So, but what I'm interested in was getting down to, the classroom level, and were there certain classrooms that, move students significantly, and other classrooms that didn't. And then, so what can we learn from the ones that move students, and not do the ones that
we needed a comparison with attendance too, because
that was the other big one. When I went down, there's like 50% of the class was absent. So if you just look at this at the high, overall level, it just kind of loses all the content, loses all the detail of it. And so that's what I was trying to ask here for. I may need to sit down. I don't know, Jeff, do you have any thoughts on that?
The attendance data, we just need a little bit more time to pull that attendance data and match it up with the SSID numbers that we pulled for the student assessment data, which could glean something. When we did run the numbers, there were some kids that definitely gained and some that did not. But the additional data that you received today was kind of a smaller grain of what we provided earlier. So I will say that much about it. If you'd like to sit down with Shelby at some point, we could do that again. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I think I'd like to, and particularly with the lens of attendance, because I think that it was what, 4 weeks, and was it 4 days a week for 4 weeks? So 16 days, and so to use the typical attendance thing of like 10%. So, I'd like to see students that were there for like 14 days or more, how they performed versus students that were, there for much less than that, to make, because you know, what I'm looking for, and I haven't really seen yet, is the learning from this in terms of impact for next year. You know, what, I mean, if attendance was a big issue, then, you know, maybe we need to, you know, put some focus on attendance in summer school in the same way we do attendance in our regular school. Or, you know, the other interesting thing was there was a lot of special education students that were going, there were a lot of ELL ML students that were going. So was there certain practices that were particularly effective for special ed students? Or, you know, and that was, so it just, for me, it just cried out for a lot more disaggregation than just kind of making one high level blanket statement that, you know, I mean, if it didn't really make much difference, then why are we wasting our money going there, do something else, you know? But I think it's much more nuanced than that. I mean, it usually is. And so anyway, that's just, so yeah, I'd be happy to sit down with Jeff and Shelby and kind of probe it a little more. Anyway, I was probably the person who requested all this, and I wasn't really expecting a student by student, you know, flow of this. I was expecting more some disaggregation, summaries, and then that kind of thing. So maybe we can get to that if talk a little bit more.
Is it possible? I understand the reluctance to disaggregate more that makes the students identifiable, but I would be even willing to get narrative that describes what folks think happened, even though there could be a bias in it. A narrative would at least give us the idea that, yeah, the ones that scored the worst were only there 2 days or whatever, rather than have to do it statistically. If there's a way for somebody to look at it and give us a narrative report.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to one of the teachers that was in summer school. I think she was doing 5th grade or 1st grade. And she said, you know, that there was a lot of benefit in her classroom. So yeah, kind of combining some of the the
narrative from staff would be
and then yeah. And also, I mean, the scholars are just looking at the academic side of it, you know, but there's other aspects to summer school as well. And so anyway, I just want to make sure that we've learned whatever lessons we need to learn for the following year, and then make it so we can make it the best summer school we possibly can.
Well, and we need to, if we want staff to want to be involved in summer school, we need to make a positive case for it. And this doesn't necessarily make that.
Yeah, and I was just kind of looked over the whole thing, and it kind of seemed like the elementary level had more drastic changes in IRD scores. It's like some grades reached to like -50 and or like rise to 50. I don't know if that has something to do with the learning level or maybe how the program is set up. So maybe that could be something to lean into compared to like the middle school level.
Yeah, it's just basically just looking for a more nuanced analysis here.
And I think just generally speaking, I mean, I think, you know, after a long conversation on Saturday about, you know, CEE data, I think there's just a lot of opportunity for us as a district to like figure out like how we're actually using data. You know, it's great to have a report with this information, but if we're not actually using it to ask ourselves critical questions about what's working, what's not working, and then make actionable steps forward, then it's just data on a page. And so we really do have a lot of work to do, because I don't feel like oftentimes we're really getting that nuanced understanding of this is what the data is telling us, and this is what we're going to do with it moving forward to actually continue to see our things improve, right? There's that step that's missing that I know we've been asking for a while, probably longer than before I was even here.
And to look back at past history,
yes,
what's worked and why are we not doing that anymore? But
the one thing I will say, in looking at some of this data, I mean, we're talking some of these like 4th grade students getting 30 or 40 scale points. I mean, that's for 4 weeks. That's like half of the level or more, which is an outstanding. So for some students, it's obviously working extremely well. And so,
but what are those things?
Yeah,
we don't know if we're not
exactly. Really. And who are those students? I mean,
exactly.
So yeah.
so much to unpack, and I don't get the sense that that's happening, but maybe it is, but we're not hearing it, hearing the results of those conversations. All right, moving on to policies for review. So there are several policies here. This is the first read of these policies, right? And any, oh wait, it's right there. Sorry, there's the memo. Yeah, oh no, that's not. Any context as to where the changes came about? Are these kind of just legal updates, WASDA things? Okay, okay, great. Any questions? Please.
I guess, yeah, so this, I don't know, currently this is, I'm particularly interested in the financial education one, because I know a lot of students at Foster High School are interested in that one. And there's been, so there are financial education state standards, and to my knowledge, we're not teaching them in this district. So this board policy would require that to start happening. Am I correct in my interpretation here?
It does not require it. It says the district encourages students and their families to take advantage. So it's not a requirement for graduation.
No, but is it saying that we're going to offer it?
We should be off. So are you asking the requirement? Or are you asking, are we offering?
Maybe I have to go read, because there are state standards, and it seems like, okay, do we require it, or do we?
Because they have standards for pretty much any course offered, but we don't write for every course that there's a standard.
Right.
So if we offer this course, there would be a standard.
Well, this is like, I mean, the state standards I've looked at, I mean, it's like a K-12 thing. So it's like each year you will teach, you know. And so if we, you only get to the, it seems like in the early grades, I mean, you don't get to pick your courses. So in that, I would say we should teach it. And then when you get to high school, I have to think about that one. I mean, I know we have a financial algebra course. I don't know, I'd be interested to hear from some more students.
I don't take it, but I think the last time we talked about it, I don't know if it's still offered at the high school anymore.
Yeah, I've heard 2 stories. It's in the course catalog, but I don't know if it's actually offered.
Yeah, I think we have several courses there in the course catalog because they're approved, but if not enough students sign up, they probably don't offer.
There is a CTE section of financial algebra at Foster High School this year.
And do we know, like, off the top of your head, how many students are enrolled?
I don't have it by class, but I could get that for sure. It's a CTE class, Dr. S's classroom.
I know students, I've heard students in the past really like that. Of course, so
does that count as a math? Does that count as a math?
Yeah,
yes.
It's subject for algebra 2.
Okay.
So that you can use that to meet the graduation requirement. I mean, I'd like to, you know, maybe we need to talk about this some more, but I'd like to see that, you know, the standards implemented at least K-8.
Well, I'm confused. This one says a high school credit. Is this supposed to be all grade levels or just a high school class?
Well, access high school credit.
So the district, of course, this is also mastery-based learning, so the district will award financial education credits to students based on demonstrated mastery proficiency. So that's like the world language credit program where, you know, they would take an assessment, and demonstrate their proficiency. So actually, probably what I'm talking about is a separate policy from this. This is just saying, well, this is just saying we'll award, you know, that we would have to develop or find somewhere an assessment, financial education assessment, for which a student could take and then get credit.
And they get credit, and we're not,
Classified as encouraged.
yeah, we're not offering a course, we're just offering the assessment for
Yeah,
credit.
right.
Okay.
That's what this says. So did this come from Wall Street?
It looks like they just updated education to literacy. If I'm looking at both of them.
Oh, so we never had this policy at all.
I think we did.
Oh,
Maybe, I don't see an initial adoption date, so maybe not.
so if you just, this policy by itself, the implication is that we would have to develop some assessment system to give to students. But we wouldn't, they would have to get their knowledge somewhere else.
Right.
Which is like the world language credit. I mean,
Yeah.
in that case, students get their knowledge of language somewhere else and then.
This would be a new policy.
Yeah, new policy.
Yeah, it does not exist currently. So then I guess that poses the question. Can we do that? Like, do we have the capacity
Right.
of, you know, internally to actually be able to develop whatever that assessment looked like? I know we don't really particularly have the financial resources to invest in an assessment, right? Or maybe we do, but.
I expect we would just, I'm sure there's ones out there.
Mhm.
We would just probably pick one. I mean, that's what we did with world language credit. We didn't develop any stuff.
But we do have to buy it.
Yeah,
You might have to buy it depending if one's available. I mean, maybe the
Right.
credit unions have one available. I don't know.
oh,
You can inquire.
I feel like that would be important to make sure that we have the ability to implement something before we pass a
Yeah.
policy requiring it. Yeah, that was important to me.
But I'd also like to look at, yeah, so another policy that's, what are we doing about financial education for our students? Just for.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions around this policy? Rest of just updates.
Except the release from institutional education. That's the new one.
Just 317.
So 2401 on hold for additional information.
Yes. I think as far as like, I don't think I'd feel good approving it at the next meeting unless there was some understanding that that was even feasible at the moment. Yeah.
Do we, I'm looking at 3117. The ones in or released from an institutional education facility. So this is saying if we end up with a student that has lost education due to being in a facility, that we will have the ability to waive specific courses and get this student through. Have we done this? Have we?
This is a,
I know this is a new one, but.
yeah, this is a new one, so.
But do we have we dealt with this before? Do we have a system set up to
I would have to look to see what we've done in the past.
I would think that we've done this and that the high school especially would know what to do with a student coming in.
Yeah, I would have to check and see what's happened in the past.
So this one might be on hold as well. Sounds like we just need a little bit more information.
And then was one of the others, the student records one, 3231, that was the one where I think it changed from we could not withhold a request for a transfer of records, even if the student had a fine. So we're just kind of giving away those fines. I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we are actually looking at that.
What would be examples of fines or fees that a student would?
Library books that didn't get turned in. Test tubes that were broken in chemistry.
We fine kids.
Lunch things that
Breaking test tubes?
I don't know.
Oh, you were, okay, okay, you were just using it.
When I was a kid.
Okay.
Was that change made as the result of a change of law?
Well, it looks like maybe it was a McKinney-Vento thing.
Yeah, it looks like it's related mostly to the McKinney-Vento.
So it's probably not something that's optional. It's
Great.
It's listed as essential, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
it's a must.
Okay, any other thoughts, things, please? Okay.
So we don't need more info on 3117.
3117, yes.
Okay.
So two of them are on hold until we get a little bit more context and info. 3117 and 2401. And the other ones are okay. Okay. All right. So that moves us to our action items. So the first one is action item 9A, approval of human resources staffing report. Wait, right?
Organization of the board.
Okay, this meeting agenda must be different.
Oh, is it the written one different?
Oh, yeah. Print it out.
I see. Okay. Annual organization of the board. Well, I had all kinds of like weird things that are things not being consistent online, and that's just, okay. Annual organization of the board. All right, so this is our annual organization where we elect our officers, our president, our vice president, and our not our elected reps. That happens later, correct, in June. I don't think I was here for last time. How does this work?
I nominate Carl to be
I second.
president, Dave to be vice president.
Okay, so we're doing my time. So you nominated Carly for president.
And I second.
You seconded it. Carly has some stuff to do.
Okay.
There's no code around it, is there?
And then we vote.
Once she accepts it, it's a roll call then.
Yeah, let's have to.
Thank you. So it's a roll call vote, yeah.
Yeah, so it's holding.
Oh, dreaded holdings?
Mhm.
Oh, Jan?
Yes.
Yes and no.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and
You get
nominate Dave as vice
Okay, Carly, abstain? Just kidding. Yes, kidding. Yes, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't joke. Okay. But then for vice president, I heard a nomination
of Dave.
Dave?
Second.
Okay, Dave, do you accept the
Yes,
nomination? Okay. So Jan,
Yes.
Carly is yes.
Yes. Edna.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. Now to 9B, which is approval of the human resources staffing report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It stands approved. Now action item 9C, approval of the CTE 5-year plan.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, discussion?
Yeah, I do, I want to ask a few questions, Jeff, about how the race and equity toolkit was applied to this. So give a fairly long answer here with some words in here. I'm interested in hearing what the definitions are. So we reviewed non-traditional enrollment in the CTE program. So how are you defining non-traditional?
So attached to the Perkins grant, that's one of the indicators in terms of, if you can believe this, occupations are classified by male or female by the federal government. And they want to know how many non-traditional females are taking, or not or traditional, how many females are taking non-traditional classes and how many males are taking non-traditional classes. An example would be a female in a manufacturing course and a male in, let's say, a home and family life course for something.
Where
is what they do. So that's something that they track at the federal level. And so that's something that we have to track also.
Okay, so in this context, non-traditional is referring to gender.
Correct.
Okay. And then non-traditional fields are the flip side of whatever the profession is, nursing or teaching or manufacturing or whatever. Okay.
Correct.
Can we refuse to answer those?
Yeah.
And then they won't give you the money.
It's part of the Perkins grant, the federal grant.
Yes.
So we cannot apply for the grant.
It's an effort to diversify the workforce so that we have more representation in some of the fields that haven't been represented in the past. And so it's really looking again to diversify our workforce so that students have as many options as possible to pursue a career in whatever they choose to.
I don't argue with that. The argument is with what's called traditional and what is in that bias of who's deciding that, you know, so yeah.
Do we get more grant funding if, say, we get quote unquote higher non-traditional students, or
there is a thing called a reserve Perkins grant, and those are awarded to school districts that do improve that indicator. We received a Perkins reserve grant last year where I believe graduation rates, and I can't remember what the other indicator was, but we did get an award for our increase in one of these indicators. Yes.
Something we should be celebrating.
Yeah, it's really complicated. So I'm curious, what about our students? Because I know we at least have a small handful at Tukwila, at Foster, that don't identify as male or female. How are they being designated in these non-traditional things? And I just want to make clear, Ms. Baker, I understand this is not you. So the look on my face is about the fact that this isn't even something that we have to do. Yeah.
And the issue that you spoke to is not only in Tukwila, it's across the entire nation. And I don't disagree. It's a structure that in Perkins 5 is relatively new, which is a little bit kind of scary in this area in terms of the progressiveness of it. But that's where we are at this point in time.
So then do we, if we do have non-binary or genderqueer folks that are participating in these, are we then forcing them to select a gender to then be able to report, or is there an option to report for people that are non-binary?
The federal government is still a binary situation.
So we are asking students, or we are misgendering students to make a report.
We're determining for them, yeah.
Okay. I think it would be at least worth talking about that part. So even if we have to still do that type of reporting, I feel very strongly that we should not attach a gender that is not real or it's not accurate to an individual. So if we do have someone that identifies outside of female or male that is participating in one of these, I would almost rather, I don't know, because
you know, you don't want to disappear them.
I don't want them not be represented, but I also like, we're also disappearing them if we just tag them in a gender. Sorry.
Yeah.
I know I'm not being super articulate. I mean that I'm just really shocked by it. I should be.
And the information is pulled from Skyward, our student information system.
And is the gender that their name goes under in the report, is it their preferred, like their gender identity, or is it like the gender, like the sex assigned member?
It would be whatever in the enrollment form, whatever is indicated on the enrollment form when they enroll in our district.
And in Skyward, is other the option besides male or female? Or are there multiple options? Other options besides?
I think our enrollment form does have other.
Is that something that we can change? I know there's a little bit of a sidebar, but
I think we did talk about that. I think we can change that. Okay. My question would be, so if that information is being pulled from Skyward, what happens then when it doesn't fall into one of the two categories?
That's an excellent question that I'll have to ask. Because it should be an additional category in my mind.
Right, but I'm just curious, like how that turns out to be a report, and then what happens with that. So that's just, I'd be curious about that.
Yeah, good questions.
So I guess one of the things I was looking for in all this, it's a little hard to tell in here, but did you find any particular disproportionalities by race or special education or MLL, ELL that kind of stood out that we would need, that in terms of access to CTE programs that we should be paying attention to?
No, I didn't find any significance. We have, I believe, approximately 878 students enrolled in Foster. We have 787 students taking CTE courses. And so that indicates that there's a wide array of students in these courses. So no, I didn't find a lot of disproportionality when I looked at the data of enrollment.
Okay.
And I just want to add that the student voice that I gathered was just really informative this time. I really thought that they really shone a light on some real important things that we need to do moving forward. And that is now in the plan.
Yeah, I appreciated you including, a good number of those in the plan. So that's great.
I'm just curious, under this educator licensing, one of the students said, I love this. They said, I love that CTE classes have more advantages than other classes. What would you say the advantages?
I think they love the project-based learning that's offered. I think they enjoy working in teams and communicating with one another. I believe the field trips are a big kind of feather in their cap, so to speak. And I think the idea that you're looking forward as far as what your possible careers could be in the future are things that all kids are getting out of our CTE classes. I think, Dennis, you've taken a CTE class, right?
I'm taking one right now. So,
yeah. And we will be surveying students at the end of the semester to answer some of those questions Director Morris.
Oh, thank you.
And the only thing, the last thing I'll add is Veronica's gonna have to add one more grant to her list because we received an outdoor grant for $35,000 for our environmental science class yesterday, so that we can begin to develop a garden or finish the garden and work on some natural areas.
Cool. Great. It's really wonderful. Thank you for spearheading that. All right, so we all in favor of approving the CTE plan?
Aye.
Aye. Yay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to action item 9D, approval of travel requests for AASA conferences in February and April 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it stands approved. Then 9E is approval of the overnight travel request for Nature Bridge.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then can we have students come talk to us about their experiences and what was learned at the AASA conference?
Were you thinking that at like a work group session or at like a school board session? I mean, I can make it more to the point. I want to be here. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an extensive report, just informational.
Okay, and then action item 9F, which is approval of a contract for education impact exchange.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, discussion? I have one question just to make sure I think I'm understanding. This is in support of the dual language program, right? And then how is this never mind, it's written right there. Okay. Okay, so it's all being paid for with the grants that we already have.
Yeah, so these two dual language grants will sunset at the end of this year. They're called exploratory grants, and so you do the work to set your program to start. And so our first kindergarten class will start in September. So we're doing we need to close out a long journey with this, and so we'll be finalizing the steps this year. And the educational impact exchange has a three-pronged approach to support us through the rest of this year. Part of it is principal support for all of our principals, because ideally we'd like to, even though we're starting in one school, we want to sort of like roll it out, and we'll definitely be rolling it up K-12. So that's why you see there's some 3 different buckets of that.
So knowing that we've kind of have had a little of a time with this, and knowing that this is a little bit of a financial investment, do you feel pretty confident that we will be ready by bringing these folks in? They're going to help get us ready to be able to roll it out.
Circles had worked with Educational Impact Exchange before, and so they have context that is new for me here, and what they will be helping with our shared leadership team. So our shared leadership team is kind of the work. We've had a task force that's sunsetting. We're starting with the language advisory group and this shared leadership team to do some of the operationalizing. We've already decided on a 90-10 program model. We've already decided on the school. Now what's left for decisions are like language allocations, what's getting taught in Spanish, what's getting taught in English at each. And we will do that not just for kindergarten, but our decision will be in scope and sequence for K-12. So the shared leadership team, which includes Dr. Brunstad, Mr. Dragonoff, myself, and Mr. Lopez Chavez, are kind of the core nexus of operationalizing those pieces, bringing that information forward to the dual language advisory team, getting feedback, and then making sure that it can be up and running by, I guess we'll start in September. So I do absolutely have confidence based on my previous experiences that all of this stuff can hit the ground running and we can get it moving forward. Because I've done this in other places and you can move pretty fast once you're ready to start making decisions and move forward. I absolutely think that this group is going to help with the readiness of all of our leadership team so that we can carry that lift to the finish.
When would be a reasonable time for kind of a report back to the board on the progress? To make sure that we're still on track for the 2023 school year.
So it's December. I think depends on what type of progress, but certainly the ours will be reported out at those monthly meetings with the dual language advisory team. And my goal would probably be to be able, like April or May-ish. I don't know what your like annual planning presentations is. We will have had a teacher hired and some relief for, we will have had our enrollment. By then we should, if it goes according to my previous experience, we should have been able to identify who our students and families are who are going to be in that first classroom by that time as well. So if we look by the end of April, having that information, probably having more summary data by the end of May.
Okay. And then would that still be enough time, like if there were challenges or roadblocks, particularly that the board could help with, would that be enough time to course correct at all?
So I guess it would depend. I would hope that any roadblocks or challenges that we identify early on, we would be able to put on early and not just hold off on this until then. Part of the dual language advisory team is that asked Dr. Herndon to share with you all, because we really like to work on that.
Oh, I was on it, but I got dropped off. So
we're kind of just reconstituting. So
yeah,
we're just reaffirming everyone's interest.
Yeah, so you can either choose me again or you can choose somebody else. Okay.
It doesn't have to be limited to one, but I know you guys have rules of form.
Yeah, can't do more than two.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor of approval of the contract?
Aye.
All right, stands approved. Okay, so that brings us to near the end. We'll move to our second opportunity for public comment. You can either do so here in person or online by raising your hand or typing your name in the chat. Just a second. All right, seeing none, we'll now be moving to executive session. This executive session is to review the performance of a public employee for RCW 42.30.110G. I'm going to ask that folks clear out, and we're also going to take just a very brief recess for just about 3 minutes until 8:15, and then I'm going to say a 30-minute executive session with the potential to extend. So I hope we'll be back to be back by 8:45. Okay, cool. Yeah, you can have that set. I'll go get it.
And you know, well, it's lower than what they anticipated, I believe. So, what I just don't think we have to so badly.
Okay, we are going to extend our executive session for an additional 15 minutes. We'll be back at 9 o'clock. It is 9:08 and we are returning from our executive session. So I will move to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are officially adjourned at 9:08.